Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. The Tenpenny Files is a daily conversation meant to inform and educate, not just to entertain. I come prepared, and we let the discussion unfold naturally with people worth hearing on topics worth exploring. If it matters to your body, your freedom, or your future, we talk about it here. Each day, I talk to authors, documentary filmmakers, and independent thinkers whose work challenges mainstream messaging. We cover a wide range of topics, so there's something for everyone. We cover government, politics, and history, astronomy, pets, and travel, food, farming, and fitness. And of course, we talk about vaccines, health, and health policy. We also have a once a week discussion or conversation with an author or a pastor who writes about faith and biblical principles. The goal for me is to introduce you to topics that you've never heard of before or conversations that you always wanted to have time to explore but didn't know where to begin. Our authors will show you the way, and hopefully, this will be a baseline for you of a place of where to begin. Join me every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time at the Tenpenny Files, as we hear from voices that are often been ignored, silenced, or censored, and truly have something important to say. But before we begin, I want to invite everyone to join us to become a Tenpenny Prime member. Prime members receive an exclusive monthly white paper about your body that I write, a recorded presentation that I do that you can listen when you have time. It's usually about a half an hour long, and also an Ask the Expert masterclass that is at the end of the month. We're going through the whole body systems. We started last year with the thyroid, and now we're going through each month. We're going through a different body system, and I bring in an incredible expert for you to join us on Zoom and get your questions answered one-on-one with quadruple and triple board certified physicians from all over the world, really specific to let you educate you more about your health. Our principle is that if you know more about your body, it'll be easier and more readily able for you to take care of it once you understand a little bit more about your body. So to find out more, go to primemembership.drtenpenny.com, primemembership.drtenpenny.com. Learn more about our program, hopefully join us and support the work that we do. Now, let's get started. Today's conversation is with researcher, cancer survivor Danny Carroll to talk about his book, Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis. I'd say that was pretty non-mainstream. So we're going to have a lot to talk about here today. Danny, welcome so much to the Tenpenny Files. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Dr. Tenpenny. It's an absolute honor to be with you.
How did you first come to know about the work of Dr. Ryke Hamer and the German New Medicine?
Well, my journey started over 2 decades ago. I live in India, and I had a close friend who was diagnosed with cancer. In India, if you do not have insurance or money, then you're out of luck. So she came to me for help. I essentially funded her treatment, and within 3 rounds of chemotherapy, she died. She used to message me from hospital saying, Danny, I don't know what these doctors are doing, but it feels like they are putting poison in my veins. And I knew no better at the time, so I strongly encouraged her to keep going with the treatment. And when she died, and I was absolutely devastated after she passed away. So I was in my mid-30s. I said to myself, okay, I'm going to search to the ends of the earth to find a better solution to the problem that we call cancer, which I'm now about over 20 years along that journey. In 2012, about 8 years into my search, I had a personal spontaneous healing experience. I had golf ball sized knots in my muscles for a 6 month period, and I was in physio having those knots ironed out, which is excruciatingly painful. And after 6 months, I resolved a critical conflict in my life where my soulmate and I were supposed to end or terminate our relationship, and we discovered that we could not terminate it. And on the Friday night, I went to bed with these golf ball size knots, and on the Saturday morning, they all magically disappeared. So they just went poof and just disappeared into the air, which was an absolutely mind-blowing experience and really piqued my interest. And I thought if there's some way that resolving a challenge in life can make these golf ball-sized knots magically disappear, then maybe there's a similar mechanism that relates to cancer. And then I went on the search for various mind-body medicine modalities, and I very soon found Dr. Hummer in 2012.
Well, it's really amazing when you did all of his research. Was all of his research and where you found it, was it all written in German?
No, luckily it by that time his entire body of work had been translated into English. At least the major part, the major frameworks. He has a library of books that have still not been translated into English. But the main body of his findings is now in English. Yes.
Well, that's really good. That's good for
Yeah.
in your book, and your book is it's a lovely book. It's
Thank you.
small, and
Tiny, right?
you said it's by design. It's small that way to give people an overview so they can read it quickly. But
That's right.
it's in the subtitle on the book. The title of the book is Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis. The subtitle is Discover a Palliative Care Alternative Medicine You Can Survive. And I think that that's really, really important. And you state in this book, quote, without exception, all cancer patients had experienced some type of trauma, and that cancer is a survival program. And you call this the iron rule of cancer. Can you please explain that for our listeners?
Yeah, so the iron rule cancer is Dr. Hummer's title for cancer. So I'll give you Dr. Hummer's story sort of covers exactly how he made these discoveries, right? Dr. Hummer was a traditionally trained medical doctor. He was actually an internist and a cancer research specialist. And in 1978, his 19-year-old son was shot by an Italian crown prince, Prince Emmanuel of Savoy, and he died. And 2 months after his son died, Dr. Hummer got a very fast-growing and rare testicular cancer called a testicular teratoma, with what they described as metastasis to the stomach. Now, he had his testicle removed and part of his stomach. He refused chemo and radiation, but he couldn't help thinking that 2 months earlier his son dies. 2 months later, he has a fast-growing cancer on a reproductive organ. I mean, he's a very intelligent man, and he couldn't help thinking that there could be some connection, causal link. So he was given a 1% chance to survive. But he survived it, and when he did, he went back to work. He was the head of a gynecological oncology cancer research unit at a university associated to Munich University in Germany. And he was working with 200 female terminally ill cancer patients. And what he wanted to do, doctor, was to find out whether these ladies, like him, had gone through some form of unexpected emotional trauma before they got cancer. And out of 200, 200 had. And basically, when he started putting those women into different categories of uterine, cervical, ovarian, globular, breast, etc. cancers, what he observed is that the women in the same category had all suffered from the same type of trauma. So, for example, the women with ovarian cancer had all gone through some form of profound loss before they got cancer. In the same way, he went through a profound loss when his son died. Now, wind forward 40 years of cancer research, working with more than 50,000 cancer patients directly. what Dr. Hummer discovered, and his example is quite easy to understand, and that is that basically his son was shot and murdered. Okay, he had a fast-growing tumor on his testicle that he discovered was actually functional tissue. Okay, and that functional tissue had a purpose of increasing his sperm and testosterone, basically to give him a better chance of getting his wife pregnant so that he could replace the child he just lost. This is a survival biological program. In survival terms, he lost a progeny. And what nature did is it responded in order to increase his capacity to replace that progeny. And what Dr. Hummer discovered was that if he had in fact got his wife pregnant, then the biological purpose of that would have been achieved, and it would have switched off naturally in the same way it switched on naturally. I mean, when he had this testicular teratoma, he didn't sit there when his son died and said, "Oh, okay, I just lost my son. Let me increase the size of my testicles so that I can have a better chance of getting my wife pregnant." You don't do that, right? I mean, nature has these biological survival programs built that run in our subconscious mind. And when the need arises, the danger or the survival event happens, then basically the programs are switched on. And when you fulfill the purpose of those programs, i.e., if he had got his wife pregnant, then that program would have switched off because he would have achieved the purpose, the biological purpose of that program. And then that tumor would have been removed and then removed via the liver and removed out of the body. Now, he didn't know this at the time because he was a traditional medical doctor. Okay, so when he had surgery, he had his testicle removed and part of his stomach. So he only found this out in the research process. But once he made that connection, basically what he did, doctor, was he unraveled the entire biological code and discovered the life trauma, the life tragedy, or the life challenge that changes every cell in our body, right? And what he discovered is essentially that there is no such thing as disease. Every change in our body, whether it's a runny nose, a sore throat, or a cancer, is a survival biological response. The only problem is that we don't understand that. So we've been taught that nature is going wrong. Okay, but the reality is in our lifetime, nature will never make a single mistake. The only problem is that we don't understand it.
You know, you said in your book, and you've talked about it before, is that Dr. Hammer was a conventionally trained medical doctor. He was an MD, he was head of an oncology department. And over the course of his career, after what happened with his tragedy and finding out about the connection between the emotional assault and his testicular cancer, that evaluated and treated more than 50,000 patients. But
That's right.
was convicted of practicing medicine without a license.
Oh,
And that be
oh.
considering the fact that he was a licensed medical doctor. You know, they've done this to so many people over the centuries, but tell us Dr. Hammer's story of how he was eventually convicted of practicing medicine without a license, even though he was a licensed medical doctor.
Oh dear. So he was the head of the gynecological oncology cancer research unit. Once he did this research with these 200 women, he presented a postdoctoral thesis to the university he's working at, which is called Tübingen University in Germany. Now they basically in German law, if a postdoctoral thesis is presented, then by law they have to prove or disprove those findings, right? And what happened is they refused to verify Dr. Hamer's medical discoveries. So Dr. Hamer took them to court. And when Dr. Hamer took Tübingen University to court, the judge in court said, why did you refuse to verify in accordance with the law, Dr. Hamer's postdoctoral thesis? And Tübingen University said, we do not want to know whether Dr. Hamer is right or not. Okay. Now, when he presented his thesis, they firstly said, right, we give you two choices. You can either retract your findings or we will fire you. Okay. So he said, I'm not retracting my findings. This is true as I know it. So they fired him immediately. Okay. But then that was in 1981. In 1986, so then he continued to treat cancer patients. And in 1986, he was basically struck off from practicing medicine for refusing to prescribe chemotherapy, okay, and to retract his medical findings. Now, over the next 18 years, he was prosecuted on multiple occasions. In one prosecution in Austria, they basically, in Neustadt, Austria, they subpoenaed 6,500 of his terminally ill cancer patients, right? Most of the patients who went to Dr. Hamer had already been sent home to die by medical doctors, and then they came to Dr. Hamer. Okay, the prosecution called up every single one of those patients and discovered that more than 6,000 or more than 92% of his terminally ill cancer patients were not only alive, but they were in full health. And as a result of that success rate of 92% with terminally ill cancer patients, he was put in prison. Okay. In his last prison sentence in 2004, he was living in Spain. He was extradited from Spain to France and put on trial because a French doctor found his medical discoveries. Okay, the French doctor was treating his French patients with Dr. Hamer's medical discoveries, and Dr. Hamer was arrested in Spain and extradited to France and put in prison for 3 years in a high security prison, right, for conspiracy to practice medicine, even though he'd never met the doctor or the patients. Okay, so I mean, essentially, they were doing everything they could to stop him from spreading these medical discoveries. And he spent, I think, like 3.5 years in prison. He had 12 attempts on his life, and they tried 75 times to put him in a mental institution over a 30-year period. And it's all basically just to stop him from being able to share because Dr. Hamer said that when his medical discoveries are allowed to surface, that 95% of all of today's symptom-based treatments, and that's both conventional and alternative, basically those modalities essentially would become obsolete. So it is in nobody's interest for Dr. Hamer's medical discoveries to surface because essentially he puts everybody out of business. Now that means that's going to destroy trillions of dollars of drug income, revenue, profit, etc., etc. And unfortunately, in today's environment, nobody is going to bail that cat what to do, except for me.
Except for you. I mean,
Yes,
we talked before about how brave you've been to be able to, do this, and that, people like you and me that take on big industry are always at risk of all kinds,
that's right.
me taking on the vaccine industry, you taking on the cancer industry. Tell us about a study you talk about in your book with a cancer study with a 92% survival rate.
Yeah, that was one of the early prosecutions, Doctor, right? I say the prosecution, they subpoenaed 6,500 of Dr. Hammer's patient files. And as I mentioned, most of the people who went to Dr. Hammer had already been sent home to die, right? Terminally ill. Okay. And the prosecution in court had to admit that more than 6,000 or 92% of Dr. Hammer's terminally ill cancer patients were not only still alive, but they were in full health. And that was one of the situations where he was essentially He got a prison sentence for helping 92% of terminally ill cancer patients to essentially fully recover their health. What do you think of that one? But Doctor, this is not new, right? I don't know whether you know do you know the case of the the surgeon, Dr. Semmelweis from the 1800s? Well, I mean, in the 1800s, doctors used to they weren't specializations. They would go from working in the morgue to going to deliver babies, right? So Dr. Semmelweis basically forced his doctors to wash their hands before if they went from the mortuary to go and deliver it to birth delivery, and they would go there smelling of death, right? So Dr. Semmelweis forced his doctors to wash their hands with lime to remove the smell of death, and it significantly reduced infection and increased the success rates. And he was put in a mental institution and murdered for the outrageous suggestion that if you washed your hands before you went into surgery, that it would have better outcomes. So, Dr. Hamer was put in a mental institution and murdered for the outrageous suggestion that if doctors washed their hands before surgery, it would reduce infection rates. So fast forward, now, 150 years later, and imagine Dr. Hammer has discovered essentially the life cause and biological purpose for every change in our biology, and fundamentally the fact that there is no such thing as disease. So you imagine how dangerous he is to the system, right?
Well, it's happened to like Dr. Royal Rife that when he developed the Rife technology and the Rife microscope to, to look at a bacteria and use a frequency to shatter the bacteria, so they could use frequencies on the body to heal you from whatever's ailing you. And there have been lots of doctors in America that had early on joined the the ACAM, the American College of the Advancement of Medicine, which was the first organization to stand up against the AMA when the group of integrative doctors were first getting together. I believe that started in the 50s as a big result and a big pushback. The environmental medicine doctors, they've taken it, in the knee because they would dare to say that was something in the environment that was toxic that might be making people ill, and so a lot of them were wiped out, their businesses were wiped out. Yeah, there was the physician that he dared to give a shot of vitamin B12, and the FDA came to his office, kicked in the door, absconded with his staff, and all those different things because it was Jonathan Wright, Dr. Jonathan Wright, and they took just because he was giving vitamin B12 shots. So over the all the physicians that thought outside the pharmaceutical box and realized there was something more to health than giving people toxic soups and plastic, plastic-based medicines that came from, Rockefeller Institute and the oil industry. That
Mm.
something that was going to work, and so many of them were destroyed. We've got a couple of minutes here before the break. Let's talk just a second about how you applied these concepts to your own health.
Well, I mean, I've been very blessed. I only learn from personal experience. I mean, I've had lung cancer with a full lung collapse. I've had testicular cancer. I've had jaw cancer, and recently just had 3 reconstructive surgeries on my jaw. I had skin cancer. I had rheumatoid arthritis. I had chronic irritable bowel syndrome for 15 years, chronic bad back for 15 years, and essentially I've used Dr. Hummer's medical discoveries to resolve all of those issues. It's been the most extraordinary learning curve. I mean, you mentioned frequencies in your previous discussion. Dr. Hummer spent the last 10 years of his life helping children with autism and Down syndrome to essentially to fully recover their health using a music therapy that Dr. Hummer developed at 432 hertz in order to help people with extreme autism and Down syndrome and cancers and most other conditions, essentially to pull through and fully recover their health just by using that frequency healing. Okay, so I mean, the discoveries that he has made, Doctor, are absolutely extraordinary, and I've used and tested all of his discoveries on myself. I'm highly cynical, especially when it comes to anything to do with health. I spent nearly a decade running around in circles, testing modalities. And everybody was saying, yes, 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 this is the Holy Grail, and this solves all the problems, and this solves all the problems, and all of them were just symptom-based treatments like conventional medicine. Dr. Hamer's medical discoveries are the only causal modality I've been able to find in over 2 decades. And we're taught in business that you can only ever solve any problem by addressing the cause. You can never solve any problem by addressing the symptom. And Dr. Hammer's essentially given us a sniper's rifle to know exactly what the life cause of a problem is. And when you work out how to solve it, then the biological program fulfills its purpose and then just runs its course. And it's truly extraordinary.
Well, it is extraordinary, and I'm grateful to you that you've picked up the baton since Dr. Hammer passed in 2017. You talk about that in your book.
Yeah.
That you've decided to move forward. And I think this is a good break. This is a good place to take a short break. Hold that thought. We've got more to talk about. We're going to hear from our sponsors for AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays the 10 Penny Files on the iHeartRadio network every day, every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can also listen anywhere in the world by logging into AmericaOutloud.news and logging into their media player. If you've missed any of these great conversations we've been having, you can find the 10 Penny Files. You have to type the 10 Penny Files into the search bar on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studios, and on my platforms, which are dr10penny.com, dr10penny.substack.com. We also livecast these onto X, Rumble, and Instagram. Because there are so many great books and documentaries, and in our busy lives, there's so little time to read and to watch. These shows are meant to maximize your time and jumpstart your interest. We have a great message coming from our sponsor. Sit tight. We will be right back with more from Danny Carroll about his book, Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis. Sit tight. We will be right back. Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out, the heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to dr10penny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words: many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking with Danny Carroll about his book, Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis. Discover a palliative care alternative medicine you can survive. Let me tell you just a little bit more about our guest today, Danny Carroll. Danny spent the first half of his life living in London, completing his education with a master's degree from the London School of Economics. He then moved to live and work in India in the mid 1990s. After surviving cancer of the lung, testicle, jaw, and skin, he has spent the last 17 years studying alternative healing therapies in search for what he called the holy grail of health and wellness. He discovered a new body of medicine known as the Germanic Healing Knowledge, or Germanic New Medicine, developed by a German medical doctor, Ryke Geerd Hamer. After nearly 4 decades of cancer research, working directly with over 50,000 patients, Dr. Hamer concluded cancer is a survival biological program designed to ensure your survival, not kill you. Well, Danny, this has been so far such a fascinating discussion. Welcome back to the show. In your book, Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis, you talk about the brain's role in disease. What are your thoughts and experiences of how your thoughts are tied to your diagnosis of cancer?
So the easiest way I find to help people to understand this is how, I mean, our vehicle, this thing we call a body, and this thing we call a head and a brain, is essentially no different to your motor vehicle. Okay, so we have blood pressure and blood sugar and oxygen levels, and they go up and down, when we get into different life situations. Our vehicle has oil pressure and engine pressure, and it's essentially exactly the same. Okay, now when we experience, particularly if we experience an unexpected trauma in our lives, the trauma hits our brain, and the brain then sends signals down to our body. So we take Dr. Hummer's case, right? Dr. Hummer's 19-year-old son was shot and murdered. Okay, so that shot and murdered goes into the brain, and then the brain sends a message down to the testicles saying, God, we just lost a child. We need to, because this is a survival biological program, right? So the brain sends the signal to the testicles, right? Increase capacity testicles, we need to replace the child, right? So then the testicles increase in size, the sperm and testosterone levels increase in size, giving you a greater capacity to be able to replace the child you just lost, because it's a survival biological program. Right? It's no different to when you're sitting in your car and you're driving down the highway and you see a multi-car pile up in front of you. You have two choices. You can either put your foot on the brake and stop before you reach that danger, i.e. decreasing your speed or your capacity, or you can put your foot on the accelerator and you can speed past the danger, right? Now, basically, cancer is exactly the same as putting your foot on the brake or the accelerator. You will either increase or decrease your capacity to help you to solve the problem or to bypass the danger. Okay, in Dr. Hummer's case, what nature did was nature put his foot on the gas so that he could increase his capacity, increase his sperm and testosterone levels, so that he had a better chance of getting his wife pregnant, so that he could replace the child he just lost. Now, when you understand that fundamental mechanism, every organ or every part of your body, if you just look at what is the purpose of, you take the thyroid, for example, okay, the thyroid produces thyroxine that modulates activity. So let's say, for example, you're in a situation, you're a salesperson, and you're too slow to win the sale. So every time you're about to close a sale and somebody snatches that sale from you, then basically what nature will do is it will increase the size of your thyroid and increase your thyroxine to make you faster, so that you're better able to close the deal and not keep losing the customer. Okay. Similarly, you take the lungs. Okay. The lungs, we can survive for weeks without food and days without water, but we can only survive for minutes without oxygen. Okay, so let's say we're on the highway, we don't react fast enough and we get into that multi-car pileup. Okay, at the point of impact where you think, oh my God, that's it, game over, I'm dead. What will happen is uh, the biological response is nature will say, oh my God, he's going to die. Let me increase his lung capacity to stop him from dying. So my lung capacity will go from 100% up to 150% so that I can survive that experience or that fear of dying. So I can get more oxygen into my system so I don't die. It's a survival biological response. Okay, now that 50% increase in production in lung capacity is what medical doctors call lung cancer. Okay, and the very sad reality is that many of these situations where my lung capacity is increased from 100% up to 150% is caused by the doctor's diagnosis. Because when I go to see the doctor and the doctor says, oh, you've got bone cancer or breast cancer or whatever cancer you've got, the medical system uses fear in order to get you to comply with their treatment. So the doctors will say to you, you have cancer. If you don't start chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery the day after tomorrow, you'll be dead by the end of the week. Okay, so that fear that the doctors use, that they put into that diagnosis process, triggers the lung cancer. And then they say, oh, it spreads to your lungs. No, cancer doesn't spread. It doesn't work that way. It's biologically impossible. The cancer very often is caused by the medical diagnostic, prognostic, or treatment process.
Wow.
Hmm.
You mentioned in your book that that's just really a lot to digest and unpack there. So I hope that people,
Yes,
you get a chance to listen to this broadcast again, because there is a lot of information in there that we need to relearn, that we need
that's right.
from the medical system, from what we have been taught and swallowed by the whole pill as consumers.
100%, doctor.
And one of the things that Dr. Hammer has been able to do is that he can read a complete health history from a CAT scan of a brain.
Hmm.
Right. And I'll make my own comment about this. I remember this was probably in around 2006. I was really actively building my integrative practice then, and there was a series of lectures. Dr. Rao, I think was his name, from Switzerland, who had a clinic, and he was coming to America once a month, or maybe it was once every other month, and doing a whole series of lectures to train people. And there were probably 100 people in this class. So it was pretty good size as integrative classes would go. And we talked about pleomorphism, and we talked about specific types of homeopathic remedies. We talked about dark field microscopy, and we talked about this new German medicine that you are talking about now. And I remember him talking about this CAT scan phenomenon that you could see where someone had had a big insult. What would show up in the brain would look like a
Hmm.
circumferential circles around it, circles around it, like as if you dropped a rock in a pond of still water, and how that circle goes out. And I remember him showing a lot of these CAT scans on the slides, showing us what it looked like. And I remember seeing them periodically over the course of my career, because I'm not a radiologist, so I'm not looking at films. But radiologists interpret that as just an artifact. They don't know what it is, they don't know why it's there, it doesn't really mean anything, but it's just an artifact that shouldn't have been there. But Dr. Hammer interpreted that completely differently, and he was even challenged in medical settings. You talk about that in your book. Talk to people about how he learned that, what it really means, and how a complete health history can be learned from a CAT scan of the brain.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm lucky. I also learned from Dr. Hammer's medical discoveries, and I can also read brain scans as well. But yeah, I mean, the example I put in my book, I think it was in 1990. The thing you've got to keep in mind, Doctor, is that the CAT scan technology was only developed by Siemens, I think in something like 1975. Okay, so by medical standards, it's a very new technology. And what so Dr. Hammer, this technology came out essentially just in time for Dr. Hammer to learn to use it. And in the process of on his medical research, he discovered he mapped the entire brain, right? He's mapped every organ to every part of the brain, just like a road map. It's truly extraordinary. And from a brain CT scan, you can tell somebody's entire medical history. And one of the examples I put in a book in the book is I think from 92 he was in no 97 he was in a university in Slovakia, and he was given brain scans, and that's all he had, and the doctor said, right, okay, tell me the patient's medical history. And he correctly identified five diagnoses, and even he can even tell from the brain CT scan, okay, he had diabetes, but now it's gone. Okay, he had lung cancer, but now it's gone. He currently has cancer in the bladder. So you can tell from the brain CT scan basically what you've had and what's been fully resolved and what you currently have. And so I mean, it's one diagnostic that you can tell somebody's entire medical history. Now, Dr. Hummer said that medical doctors can't read brain scans. And he also said that things like brain cancer are biologically impossible. Right. So over the course of my learning journey, I've had many people come to me with brain cancer diagnoses. So I put Dr. Hummer's assertion to the test. And what I did when somebody came to me with brain cancer, I got them to get a brain CT scan done. You'll be shocked, right? But in India, to get a brain CT scan costs you $25 or $30, and you can get it done without a prescription. Okay, so I get all of my clients to get a brain scan done, and then what I do if I have somebody with a brain cancer diagnosis, I know that the doctors can't read these CAT scans. So what I do is I do the Pepsi test, right? The blind Pepsi test, and I say, right, go. I point them to five neurologists, and I say, right, take this brain CT scan to these neurologists, but do not disclose your previous brain cancer diagnosis. Okay. And then they'll go off to these five, and then the neurologist will say, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Nah, you're okay. Nothing you're on. Go home and take a painkiller and have a good night's sleep, and you'll be fine. Right. And then I say, right, now what I want you to do is to go to five more neurologists and now disclose your previous brain cancer diagnosis. Right. And when I send them to the next five neurologists with exactly the same brain scan, and then they disclose their brain cancer diagnosis, the neurologist goes, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, you got brain cancer. Right. I mean, the thing is, doctor, the whole system is a complete fraud. But unless you know how to flush it out, it looks very impressive from the surface, right? But when you scratch the surface, I mean, it really is a fraudulent system.
You talk about all of these success stories that you've had. Do other Germanic new medicine practitioners have similar results? And if so, are they scattered across the country? And is there a place where people that are listening to this can find them?
Yes, I mean across the US there are many practitioners. If you go to a website called globalghk.com, or was it GHK Global? Check both. There are a list of practitioners in the US that you can find and approach. I mean, yeah, of course uh, here's the thing, Doctor. Here's a fundamental, right? In my first day of business, I was taught that you can never solve any problem in life by addressing the symptom. Okay, you can only ever solve any problem in life by addressing the cause of the problem. If you address the symptom, then the problem will just keep returning. Now, our conventional medical system. And most of our alternative modalities are systems of symptomatic treatment. You can never solve any problem by addressing the symptom. You can only ever solve a problem by addressing the cause. And this modality that Dr. Hamer developed is the only causal modality that gets down into the weeds that I've been able to find in over 2 decades of looking. And what Dr. Hamer has done is he's given us a sniper's rifle in terms of understanding the cause. You know, I'm putting my foot on the brake of my car because there's a pile up ahead of me, right? I have cancer in my lungs. My lungs have increased their capacity because I feared dying when I got into the multi-car pileup. So you're given a sniper's rifle to identify exactly which life experience has triggered that problem. And equally important, the biological purpose, right? My lungs are expanding capacity because I feared dying and nature wants me to survive, so it has increased my lung capacity. When you understand the biological purpose of why nature makes the changes that it does, then you can understand exactly why it does it, right? I had a fear of death when I was in a pileup. Nature increased my lung capacity so I didn't die. That's a very different scenario to, oh, you got this disease and you got lung cancer, you'll be dead in a week if you don't start this treatment, right? Now you have across America a ton of practitioners, some very successful practitioners that you can look up, that practice this on a daily basis in the US.
Well, that's pretty remarkable, and we will for sure put, I'll look it up to make sure which one is correct.
Yeah.
Global GHK, Global GHK.
Okay.com.
Um,
Well, I think in the US, there's two. There's one in India and there's one in the US. I think the US might be GHK Global and India might be Global GHK. So it could be ghkglobal.com in the US. And they have a list of practitioners that you can look up. I mean, you don't need somebody necessarily close to you because you can do a Zoom call anywhere, right? I mean, today's world, it doesn't actually matter exactly where you are. But if you do prefer to go in person, I mean, you've got practitioners across the US that you can go to.
well, that's amazing, and I think that everybody that's listening to this should get a copy of this book. I mean, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it through our bookstore, which is bookstore.dr10penny.com, where we are collecting all the books from all the authors that we have on the show, to be able to read through this. It's a really quick read. You can read it in an hour or two,
That's
because
right.
one of the things that you talk about in this book is that this is the first of 500 different books that you're creating, one for each disease. If there's
That's right.
kind of root cause, why do you need 500 books for that?
But the devil's always in the detail, Doctor, right? So this is my breast cancer book that's currently also on Amazon. My next one is coming out on lung cancer. But when you, especially in a highly fearful situation that unfortunately cancer has been turned into in today's world, if you have a breast cancer, you don't want to be reading a book about lung cancer or terminal cancer because you don't relate to it. We've been mentally trained and taught that you've got to have a specialist, there's got to be specific to this, but there's nuance, right? I mean, the biological purpose of lung cancer of the alveoli is to stop you dying when you fear of dying. You know, the in a mammary gland in breast cancer, the biological, if let's say for example, if you have a 5-year-old child and they get hit by a car and end up in ICU, I mean, breast is a nurturing piece of equipment, right? And the mammary gland is reactivated in order to give the mother the ability to lactate and breastfeed a child and nurse them back to health again. Right. So in order to be able to understand the biological function, you can't just write one book that covers everything because the specifics and the nuance of the biological purpose of every part of the body is different. And in order for people to be able to relate to this, then you need 10 case studies on breast cancer on different type of life experiences that trigger a mammary gland breast cancer or a ductal breast cancer or a cervical cancer. And you need to cover a lot of detail and case studies of each of those programs so that people can relate to it. So, breast cancer, I've published already. Lung cancer, I'm in the process of publishing. And then basically I'll go one by one by one by one, and then I will publish one on each part of the biology.
Sense with what you said that if I have breast cancer, I'm not very likely to read a book about lung cancer
No,
like that. So that makes sense. Well, we're down to the last 2 minutes of our conversation today, Danny. And I mean, listen, we could go on for hours about this because it's so fascinating and so
that's right.
the last, just succinctly in the last minute, minute and a half here, I want you to tell people where they can get the step-by-step guide list of Germanic healing knowledge and a 1-year program of daily healing classes. Where can they find that from you?
So, my name, Danny Carroll. My home website is danny-carroll.com. That is where all things Danny happen. I do have some presence on Facebook and stuff, but it's better to start on my website. I've put up a free 400-page ebook, which is a summary of Dr. Hamer's entire medical discoveries. I put up a 1-year free course of 6 to 7 minute daily lessons so that you can start to learn these medical discoveries slowly and over time. And I've also just recently put up I've been building on top of Dr. Hamer's medical discoveries. The only thing he did not cover in his medical discoveries was how to use your subconscious mind in the healing process. I've spent the last decade or more developing that and building on top of Dr. Hamer's medical discoveries. And I've put up a free mini course that I've called the Bio Switch, which is essentially how you can consciously trigger spontaneous healing and switch cancer off like a light switch.
Well, that'll just be amazing. And that website is Danny-Carroll, Carroll, and we will put that in the show notes so everybody can see that. And so, Danny, this has just been delightful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your bravery and your courage to bring this forward under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of problems that they have tried to cause for you for trying to bring real healing to the world. So with that, I want to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close all of my podcasts with is Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in trouble, and be persistent in prayer. Trust God, lean into him. He will never let you down. Thank you for all of our listeners who've been here today and will listen to us in the future. Remember, I will see you every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern on AmericaOutloud.news and also on iHeartRadio. You can join us also on X, Instagram, and in Rumble. So we'll see you tomorrow or the next time on the Tenpenny Files. Goodbye and God bless.